the beginning, I'm going to be showing you the design process for these 3 social signs. And then in part 2, I'm going to actually show you the social signs and explain a little bit about my assembly and some of the challenges I faced. So there's 3 different designs here that we're going to be looking at, and then I'll show you the free file. So the first one is one of those sort of like paint swipe backgrounds. You could do that with regular paint or vinyl or engrave it and paint fill it, whatever works for you. And then some mirror acrylic with a black paint fill on the front engraving. This one is sort of a test of some different golds. So this is an engraving with a gold spray paint. This is a white acrylic paint fill, gold acrylic, and then we've actually also done sort of like a little cutout text on the right. And then this little bottom piece, this is pattern ply from Smoky Hills. So the final one has these little interchangeable squares. So these sort of like pop out and you can just put different ones in. With a QR code and a little business card holder, and then just a little veneer base. So very, very simple. Let's take a look at our files, and I'm going to start by showing you the design file. So this is our design file. I'm going to walk you through some of the techniques I used here and some things to watch out for. And then let me show you the free file. So this is the free file here. This is what you can download. Obviously, all the design you'll have to do yourself, but this is pretty basic. I've set this up a little differently. So it has a little teeny slot tab here that would fit into the base, and that's set for 1/8 inch material. I'm going to show you how to adjust it in a moment, but just know that's how I have it set, that this is meant to be 1/8 material, acrylic, essentially, and you may have to adjust the slots. So this little one here, so first let me show you why you have 2 pieces here. You could use either, but I've designed this, so let's change our stroke here so you can see what I'm talking about. I've designed this so that you can double layer, and this one was meant to have a kind of a cool offset here. So you could cut this layer twice, one from a solid color of acrylic and one from clear, and then cut the green slot, put the solid color of acrylic, and then the clear one in the black slot. So this is an optional slot to allow you to layer with a pattern or a texture, like holiday themed or whatever you want to do in the background. And then this little front piece is for these little tabs down here if you want to have a business card holder in your design as well. So those are optional. You don't have to cut those. Your call. So let me show you how to adjust these really quickly. Once you've determined your slot width, which is pretty easy to do because I've created a tab slot checker over here. So detour. What I'm trying to show you here is this is designed to be cut from the material that will be your base. And then these keys, there's just 2 designs in case you want to keep them on a string and have somewhere to write, or you want it more open design. You just stick those in the little slots until you figure out what the right fit is, whether you're looking for a loose fit or a really tight fit. And then you can adjust your slot width to match that. Just note that the longer your slot is, so if you have a slot that's really long, you might need to go a little bit looser than if you have a really small slot like this. And that's because like over the distance, it seems like it gets tighter, and you might have to play with this a little bit. But for the most part, this will allow you to test the interaction between different materials. And that matters because if your settings are different than my settings, you might be burning away more material, and thus you would have looser slots. So you do want to test this with your settings. I just cut these out of like scrap material of all my different things. So like basic 1/8 acrylic, it's pretty much the same. You don't need every color, but you may have like a veneer plywood, Baltic birch versus maple. You might want to, when you have a little extra scrap, just cut these out and cut some keys, and then you can find your slot width. So I found out for one of these, it's 0.115 inches. So I'm going to come back to my free file here, and I'm going to zoom in. And then all I have to do is select the slot that I'm trying to adjust, hit transform, and adjust the height to 0.115. Boop, there you go. So that is going to adjust it to the width you need, and then you can do the same to all of the other slots one by one. So 0.115, and then the same one here, transform 0.115. And you would just adjust that to whatever your size would need to be. That's all you need to do. Just make sure when you do the transform that you don't have this checked, or when you change this, it's going to change the width dimensions as well, and you don't want to do that. So now I'm going to show you how to adjust the little actual tab. You don't need to adjust the width or fiddle with that. Do not worry about that. But if you want to cut your base from a thicker material, like I did in my examples, because you can see I have 1/4 inch material here, you might want to make your tab a little bit deeper. Now, I usually just take the white arrow and I just click the line, and then I now am just controlling that one part of the shape. So I'm going to undo that. And you might be wondering, well, how do I get that to be a 1/4 inch? I'm going to take my square tool, click one time, set my height to 0.24. Now I have a little guide. I'm going to zoom in, scoot this over, get that aligned, take my white arrow tool, and then I'm just going to scoot it down. And it doesn't have to be 100% perfect because you're never going to see the bottom, but that'll give you the idea of how to adjust the tab. Now what's kind of cool is after doing that transformation, if I take my white arrow and I grab this other shape and hit Command D, it should adjust it to the same height. So because I only did one click, it's going to be the same. So let's go back and let me show you how that might work. So let's go back. I'm going to go to Edit, Redo Move. So I'm there. And instead, if I take the arrow and I just drag it and let go, I need to hold Shift there, my bad. So hold Shift, drag, let go. Now if I click this one and hit Command D, it will repeat that move. And it's Object, Transform, Transform again. That's the Command D. You really have to play with that because it's doing it by percentages a lot of times. So if you scale a circle up to be an inch, but it was 1/2 inch, and then you take another circle that is an inch and try and scale it up, it's not going to magically make it an inch. It's going to scale it by 50% or 100% or whatever you scaled it by. So that's just something to play with, but I have spent many a year in Illustrator, and for me that's instinct to at least test and see if that's going to work. So I could go through and just adjust these really quickly. But just keep that in mind that these are very easy to adjust. You can just scoot them. You can go to transform, and that's all you would need to know for these. So let's go back to our actual designs, and let me walk you through this. So you can see I have a couple different things I'm playing with. You can also see how I built the original ones. All I did was make shapes, create a rectangle, and then fuse them together using the Pathfinder tool. And once you fuse them, they become one shape. I love how that one just didn't want to do it. If you find that doesn't happen, like let's say you're fusing two shapes and you still see the line here, it's because they're not actually overlapping, which you can see. So, but if I scoot that over, bam, it's going to fuse together. So tiny little tidbit, just something to know. So for your social icons, no, you do not have to draw them. All you have to do is go to freepik.com and download them. And this is not sponsored. Freepik is free, but if you have a professional account, you can use the items commercially. You need to read their license agreements for the different things, but this will save you a lot of time. You can just download the vectors of what you're looking for, import them into Illustrator, and use those. One thing I do want to point out when choosing your icons is make sure you think about how you're going to glue it down. So originally I had wanted to use this icon for website, but I realized I was going to have a bunch of little chunks and I was not going to want to try and realign those. So I would either want to engrave that or use something simpler that's going to stay in a solid piece, and that's what I did here. So those are the social icons I pulled from online. For the text, I'll walk you through what texts are here just in case you're like, what is that font? Please tell me. This is Roughton, Winlove, Tingler Script, really popular one. This is Winlove again, Lemon Milk, and then this one, which is the same as up there. I actually don't remember what that one is. I think it's over here. Nope, lies. Okay, so this one here is Andara Script, and then I think this is Gobold. And then here's our other font here. And that's Cocoa Goose, which is in all caps for some reason. But just if you wanted to know that, you can pause, go back, find the fonts. I just played around. There's nothing really complicated here. You're going to sort of have your own ideas of what you want to do. My goal is just, I said anything in gold that I was going to cut from gold, and then everything in black I plan to engrave. So you'll notice I didn't make these two designs, but the concept here was maybe for this one I would cut 2 layers, so one for the back and one for the front, and on the back one I would fuse in the text, which is pretty easy to do. All you need to do for that is take your type when you're finished, go to Type, Create Outlines, and then grab both shapes, fuse them, and you now have a solid piece, and that's it. So very simple. I probably would scoot this down a click or two. So I just hit undo, boop. You now have a solid piece. So that's kind of what I did for this design. But I also want to show you how I did the logo. So if I take this away, you can see it's just an extra piece. I fused the black piece and engraved the gold. So how do I do that? So copy and paste my logo, and then I'm going to go to Object, Path, Offset Path. And then I'm going to set this to round because I don't want miters, and then just adjust it. But I'm actually happy with that. That's pretty much what I wanted, so 0.1389. I'm going to click OK. And then while I have it selected, you can see it's a million little shapes here. I'm going to fuse it, and then I'm going to take the fill off so I can see it as a white line. I'm going to zoom in. And now you'll notice I don't really want this like bumpy bit here, so I'm going to take my my delete anchor point tool, which if you click and hold the pen tool will show up, and I can either manually delete anchor points, or I can make it even easier and go to my brush, click and hold, grab the smooth tool, and then just run it along the edge until it's smooth like I want. Very simple. From there, all I did was, let's delete this just for a second, was bring this back over, and you can see they're grouped right now. I just have to ungroup them. And then I could take this white shape, fuse it with my background, and you can see it disappeared on me because it's white. But if I make it hot pink, set it in the back here, you can see it's now one solid shape. Now it did look like there was a weird little squiggly here. I think that just got grouped with it, so I'm going to delete that. But now I have a nice solid shape, and then all I have to do for this piece is first turn the stroke off and then set that to engrave. If you find, so for example, my logo got ungrouped here. I don't want to have to sit and click here for 800 years to turn off this stroke. So what I can do is I can just highlight everything nearby and then hold shift and unclick the object I don't want, and then hit group. I'm going to take the stroke off, and then I'm going to scoot it back into place. Those are like weird little things. I'm sure that some people were just like, what? That went right over my head. What are you talking about? You get really used to that just the more you work with Illustrator. It just becomes like second nature to like click, shift, undo, you know, all of that. But hopefully you get the idea of all I did was I created an offset, I fused it to my background, and then I just kept my logo for an engrave. So I think that covers a lot of them. So for this one, you can see I've just made a gray box to show the size of a business card so that I could determine how high to do my design, which I did. To make this little shape and the little other rounded squares, all I did was draw a square, holding shift, take my white arrow tool, and then I'm going to grab these little white dots, just one of them, and then you just drag until you have the corner value to something you like. And then I can actually set this to a stroke, make it the thickness I like, and then I'm going to set that to outlines. If I don't set this to outlines, like if I don't trace the shape, when it goes into the Glowforge, it's just going to be a thin line. You're not going to have the thickness there. So object, path, outline stroke, and there you go. So now I have that. And then for this piece, all I did was go to my polygon tool, click and hold polygon, click once, hit 3 sides, and then I just scaled it down. I know I'm like working like in the most, like this is probably so frustrating for people who look at this and are like, why are you working on this weird corner of the artboard? It's just my working method. I can't help it. So grab both shapes, fuse them together, and that's how I made that shape. That's how I pretty much make everything. I fuse shapes together. I drag corners to round things. Like for example, this one, it's like a circle and a square, and all I did was fuse them. That's all that is to make a nice rounded top. This is just a rectangle where I only rounded 2 corners, which you can do by using the white arrow and then just clicking the 2 corners. You'll notice only the 2 white dots show up, and then you can round the top. Very simple. So you're probably wondering, Danielle, where did you get this QR code situation? Because that's the only thing left on these designs that isn't super clear. So let's see if I can go find that. I know I have a little link over here that I should have pulled up for y'all. I think this is the one. So there's a ton of QR code generators out there. If someone's trying to make you pay for a QR code, leave the website, because I guarantee there's a free one and you do not need to use that. So there's a ton of different ones. You can see there's the actual one I downloaded. I'm trying to get the site to come up. Hopefully I have not completely lost my internet. Okay. So this is the one I used most recently because I wanted to do a slightly like prettier QR code. It's qrd.by. You can register for a free account. There is pricing, but I want to point out to you guys that the pricing is like so that they can make the code change its web page if you want to do it. You don't need to pay unless you're doing some like more advanced thing, in which case you're already going to know what you're doing and will know what you want to do there. So instead, I'm just going to, for free, make a QR code. It looks like my internet is like molasses today, so I apologize. So basically a URL. So let's go to my website. And then I'm just going to say, okay, so do you want to download that or do you want to do something more? And I think if you scroll down, there's like I'm trying to remember exactly where it was. I think you hit designer QR code here. It takes you to a new little thing. You're gonna have to accept your cookies. And then you can actually select from a whole bunch of different ones. And something I want to point out here, your QR code does not always have to be black and white. It just has to have the right contrast. So you'll notice there's like QR codes with borders and different colors and gradients and etc. You can do things like this. So you can change your pattern to be diamonds. And then you can have these weird little shapes here. And then you can do something like that. Like there's a lot of different stuff you can do. You can actually even add like a little logo to the center with this one. And then when you're done, you just download it. So I suggest just going with black and white because we're going to bring that to Illustrator. I'm going to hit download. It's going to take 800 years, it looks like. But you can also add like logos and stuff that they already have pre-built. And then it should give me an option to download this as an EPS, but even if it doesn't, it should still work. Wow, internet, you are just killing me today. But you can, just a note, you can add color gradients. They will still work. Oh, lordy. Okay, we're going to ignore that because it's definitely frozen. And we're going to take in one of the codes that I've already created into Illustrator. And this is what you get. So from here, you can see it's a white background paired with black. I'm going to ungroup it so that I can grab that white background, which I now have, and delete it because I don't need it. And then I'll probably re-grab everything. It looks like there's some other clear object. And the way I just did that, I know that's one of those instinctive things I was just mentioning. When objects are grouped, if you double click on it'll take you into isolation mode and it'll help you like break into the object and find different items in there. So you can see I can like isolate parts of the shape and break it apart and do some crazy stuff. That probably happens to people by accident all the time. They have no idea how they got there. That's called isolation mode. So now I've deleted the two white shapes. I'm gonna hit Command G to regroup. I'm gonna copy this, and then all I gotta do is bring it back to my social signs and paste it. That's it. If you happen to have a QR code that is a PNG, so I'm just going to search for a random QR code just so I can show you. If you download it from your, oh my gosh, never mind, I might not have internet here. Let's see if I can, oh my gosh, this is going to be a nightmare. All right, I don't know what's happening over at my house today. We'll skip that. But you can live trace it. So for example, maybe it'll let me at least zoom in. So let's zoom in. Oh, nope. Internet said no. All right, I guess we're gonna have to give up on that. But you can live trace it. So if you get like a flat object that's a PNG, just double check and see if I have one in here. Oh, I have a way I can show you. So I'm gonna grab this. I'm gonna take a screenshot of it so that it's a flat non-vector object. And then I'm going to open that. I think that's not it. That's an IKEA item. Okay. Bring that into Illustrator. And you can see it's flat. I can't ungroup it. It's got a white background. But because this is such a nice bold image, all I have to do is go to Image Trace. It's going to say it's large. I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to hit Expand. And ta-da, it's a vector object. I'm gonna use my magic wand to select all of the black, copy it, and then I can bring it back over to one of my files, and I have a live QR code that I can change the colors of, adjust, do whatever I want. Sorry, I just undid it so I could group it when I pasted it in. And there you go. So that was the QR website I used. It looks like my internet just does not agree with me, but it's qrd.by, and it allowed you to create a lot more options with your code versus many of the other sites. And it is free. I haven't had any issue using that. So once you've completed all of that, I think that pretty much covers most of what I've done here. From there, you just want to make sure you flatten all of your type by going to type, create outlines. You copy it over to a file the way you want to bring it in, and then you're just going to upload it into your Glowforge interface, and you're going to work with it from there. So they've changed the interface so that now things that don't have settings applied to them or aren't able to cut have a dotted line. So I just thought I'd point that out. But beyond that, it should be pretty straightforward. So you can see I just have objects that are by color. So anything that was going to be engraved, I have set to one color. Anything that's going to be cut is a different color. Select all of that, cut out our shapes, and then get to assembly. So let's go look at the finished assembled pieces and talk about some of the challenges. And then if you want more details on the assembly, there's pictures in the blog if you're not already there. So hopefully that'll help. Let's go check the pieces out. All right, so now that we've covered the design process, let me show you what I did for the actual assembly and give you a little sense of some of the challenges I had. So let's look at this first one. So for the first one, I actually did an engrave of the logo. I accidentally cut through a little bit of it too there, but ignore that, this is a test. And then I filled it in with gold spray paint. And it actually has a pretty good effect. You can see it's not close to like mirrored acrylic, but it's not bad. So that I did with spray paint. For these, I made this horrible mistake. I did not weld my letters, even though I swear I did. I don't think I saved it before I uploaded it. So I actually took a little Dremel tool and I tried to reconnect the letters. And you can see it's not perfect, but from a distance it would be okay. It definitely looks better than it did. And then I filled this in with white gouache paint, which is just like a more opaque acrylic. It's essentially a water-based paint. And then I scraped it off with a razor blade, like a plastic razor blade after. So I actually let it mostly dry and then scraped away. I tried the technique where you like fill it in and then wipe with a baby wipe, but that was horrible for me. It did not work well. So I actually just filled it in and then I used a really nice, fresh, sharp plastic razor blade and just scraped it off. And that worked pretty well. I definitely think the coverage is not excellent. I know it doesn't look really bad on camera or anything. But I think it would have looked better if I had done spray paint. The reason I couldn't do spray paint is because having to use the Dremel, it kind of ate up a little bit of the masking. And I felt doing something that I could like hand correct would be better than spray paint. So that's what I did there. You can see the nice type on the side. And then for the base, I just did 2 layers. So I have a proof grade type walnut MDF core plywood. That's the word I was looking for. And then I have this really cool patterned pattern ply from Smoky Hills. So that's that one. For all of these, all I did was apply 3M adhesive on the back, and then I cut the designs from the back so I could see where the 3M adhesive was and make sure that I had what I wanted. So, or that I didn't get areas that didn't have adhesive or did or waste it. I'm very conservative with it. So that's what I did for that one. The most simple design. For this next one, you notice my slot is not super tight here. This is because this was during my adjustment process, but I did 2 layers for the base. And part of why I did that is I like the idea of being able to swap the base layers depending on what you're trying to do. So if in this one I wanted to add the tab, I could just rearrange the base pieces and do a completely different design. So that was my thought there. For this one, it's just a large piece of mirror, and then this was also an acrylic paint infill. This one works a little better. I suspect if you're patient, you do one, let it dry, and then do a second layer, you're gonna get really good coverage. I'm just incredibly lazy and impatient. I don't like to wait even like 10 seconds for anything. So this is just 1 layer, but it's pretty good. It doesn't look bad. That's a little bit of dust in there, but it's not bad. Definitely from a distance of like a couple feet, you're never gonna notice. And then for the back, I tried a couple different things here. So I just basically took a brush, painted with acrylic. I suggest using like a chalk paint or something that has really, really good coverage. So what I try to do, because it was a little translucent, was paint a white solid layer back here. It didn't make much of a difference. So I know that looks ugly from the back, but you can't really tell from the front. I also didn't mix my color like super well because I was rushing. So you can see I have some like gradations here. But if you hate it, it's actually relatively easy to scrape this off with a plastic razor blade. So if you have like one really ugly spot, you can actually sort of scrape away, and you can see me doing that right there pretty easily. So you can always sort of change it. If you really don't want that to go away, you could coat a clear coat over top, sandwich it between two other pieces of acrylic, or even resin the back. Now for this, I want to show you something I tried that wasn't maybe perfect. If you see that line through there, the reason is I used 3M adhesive on the back, but I didn't want this stuff to be sticky and be picking up all kinds of dirt. So I ran my razor blade or my X-Acto knife right here, and then I gently peeled off the 3M so it's not sticky. If you're more gentle than me and don't get all the way through to the mirror backing, you probably won't have that little line, or you could just cut when it still has the little sticker piece on it and just not peel that off. That's just something, you don't usually notice it, but you definitely can see it. So just be aware of that. So you can see where my razor hit there. So that's the paint back one. Now the final one did not work at first. So you'll see some pictures of that in the blog. But what I had done was I had applied this laser safe foil. So I just applied it over top, and then I scored the design to save myself time, and then just peeled off the excess. And it was one piece because this is the part I was leaving. I didn't have to like peel all these, obviously. It was just one piece. And then I placed the board around it. The problem is the gold doesn't usually have enough contrast on its own, so the camera would not pick this up. So instead, I tried a couple experiments. So I have this piece here. So I did the gold foil on black, and that works perfectly. You can see the contrast is much cleaner. I also tested a couple spray paints on this one. So I actually scored the design again, peeled it off, and then spray painted it white and used Gorilla duct tape to apply and then peel all of the little dots off, because I didn't want to be picking those out one by one. Plus, if you can see, this particular spray paint I used is pretty easily scratched, and I had a chunk in there. So it's not quite as clean as the foil one is, but this one with the black background works perfectly fine. They also sell a black laser foil, so you could do black on a white piece of acrylic, or you could spend the extra few minutes, it wasn't really that long of an engrave, to engrave and fill it in. And I actually have an example of that one here. So I just picked a random color because I wanted to show you that you don't have to be black and white. This will work as long as there's enough contrast. So in this one, I just didn't engrave. I spray painted it, and then I peeled the masking off. And you can see I missed a spot because I was spray painting in my dark garage. But the idea is that you can make multiple of these, drop them into the frame, and then they just sort of stay in there. When you want to take them out, you just sort of tap them out. But as long as people aren't like smacking this thing all over the place, this would work fine. And then for my base, I did clear acrylic, so 1/4 inch, a little mirror tab for the front, and then just a veneer top because I thought that just looked nice. The clear acrylic, especially scooting around, is likely to get scratched, so I thought a little top would be a nicer approach. And you can see my back, I had actually tried to do the foil up here too in black. Something about the black foil where I bought it, it tends to leave a ton of sticky residue, and it's like impossible to get off. So I just covered it up with a little white piece of acrylic, and then this is just gold spray paint, just so once again you can compare the shine there. So that's all 3 designs: the interchangeable one, the paint back, my gold on black, and then I want to show you the last item here. So we showed these in the other video, or the video that you're probably still watching if I fused them together, and these are my tab slot checkers. So I've gone through a couple different ones, I've added sections, I've taken them away, but the key is just to cut little keys out of any of the materials you want to use, and then cut either the 1/4 inch or the 1/8 inch material one, depending on what the slot material will be. So you don't have to cut the 1/4 inch one out of 1/4 inch material. It's just a matter of they have bigger holes, that's all. And then you take your material, so this is white birch from Smoky Hills, and you're just gonna stick them into the tabs until you find the right one. And it looks like I actually did find the right one right away. But you can see the little star on 0.24 because that's actually 1/4 inch material. Nothing's ever actually a 1/4 inch, I promise. And then you would just go through the slots until you figure out what's a nice tight one. And see, that's there. I can get that in, but it's probably too tight for what I would need. So it looks like I need a slot of 0.225 if I'm doing wood to acrylic. And then same thing here. So I've cut a variety of different things: pattern ply, mirror, veneer plywood. This is true Baltic birch, and then thinner Baltic birch, white birch, and acrylic. And then you can do the same thing here. So this is the 1/8 inch one. So if we were going to put clear acrylic to walnut plywood, we would just do this until you find the slot. That's the appropriate level of tightness, so, and that you feel good about. So that's like a nice tight one. But if my slot's really wide and I know it's going to be hard to jam it in there, I might choose to kind of split the difference between two. So for the most part, sometimes I put a couple extra little pieces in, but it's 0.05 different from one slot to the next. So if I felt it was in between these, I would just do something like 0.102 instead of 0.105. So very, very simple. It's just, this doesn't take up a ton of material, but it's really good for comparing because your settings will affect your slots as well as your materials. So you want to make sure that you're testing this because my settings and my slots, even if I adjust the file for you, may not be exactly the same. So that's what that's for. You can see there's quite a wide variation, but that's the tab slot checker. So I think that's everything you need to know about these. Let's get these guys out of the way. But feel free to ask questions if you have any, and then additional details of the process, including showing how I use the laser foil and some of that will be in the blog. So hopefully that was helpful.